tomorrow night at the State of the Union address. So congratulations to Mayor Kim. I've been up there for a couple joint addresses, and I'll tell you what, it is a really neat feeling to be in there. Although, I don't know, another guy who's been around those for a while, Curt Smith, former presidential speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush. He's a professor at University of Rochester. He's a renowned author of baseball books in the United States, a commentator, and a guy we think is pretty darn swell on this show. And good morning, Curt, and welcome to the new Gary Sutton Show.
Well, Gary, great to be with you on yet another sultry day in Pennsylvania, I know, and certainly in upstate New York.
Yeah, I canceled my camp out overnight tonight, so I think we'll just we'll cuddle up a little bit and see how it goes.
A marvelous day to be inside.
Yes. Now, you're a guy who's written just a few speeches in your lifetime, and have you ever sat down and thought how many speeches you wrote while you were working with the president and others?
No, I try not to be depressed, so I've ignored that or tried to abstain. But I did try on several occasions when I was in the White House to renegotiate my contract to be paid by the word, but that didn't go too far.
Curt, how many State of the Union addresses did you get in on?
Well, I was, and get in on it is an operative term because I was pulled kicking and screaming into working on several of them. It's a fascinating enterprise and an assignment, frankly, Gary, that I would not visit upon my worst enemy in the face of the earth because as early, really, as late December or November, rather, and early December of the prior year preceding the State of the Union, word gets around official Washington as to which hapless speechwriter, which poor soul has been assigned the first draft of the State of the Union, and all of a sudden that poor soul develops friends that he never knew that he had. In fact, human beings that he's never met and will never meet again. Bureaucrats that come out of the woodwork and wine and dine the speechwriter and try to convince him or her that the future of Western civilization will crumble if his or her project is not listed in the laundry list of legislation to be included in the president's rendering of the State of the Union. And of course, if the speechwriter was to serve them, he would have a laundry list larger than any laundromat that you and I have ever seen. But you're not there to serve the bureaucracy. You're there to serve the president. And so what you have to do is listen politely before you turn to an unlisted phone number and realize that you're there to serve the principal, the POTUS, the President of the United States, and that at bottom, the best speech is a brief speech and a philosophical speech.
When you write the State of the Union address, give us an idea of just the pragmatic things that it has to go through. I've heard so many different times how many different people see it and how many drafts of it there are. So give us kind of just if you can, a little bit about the process, tedious though it may be for you.
Tedious is a euphemism. I can think of many other adjectives.
I understand.
Not all of which would be
applicable to radio
for family listening. That's quite correct. Well, the first draft is put together probably in early December, and we're talking here almost 2 months before the speech is given, and it will be shopped around a tad, probably given to the president first of all to get his initial reaction as to whether you're in the same ballpark with him philosophically and linguistically, and if you are, you proceed from there. And you'll talk with the speech editor, someone who is there primarily to edit, not to write. And you will also talk with policy people, both international and certainly with this president, more domestic than international. And it proceeds from there. And it will remain primarily within the speech shop, the speech editor and 4 to 5 other speech writers, and you'll bounce it off them to get their one-liners and their concepts as well. And at that point, it will go into the process known as staffing. And staffing is where it gets sent outside of the confines of the speech office, at which point it could be a dozen, it could be 2 dozen bureaucrats and foreign policy and domestic policy aides get the chance to play Broadway critic, Gary, and they get the chance to tell you what they like and what they don't like. And it's always struck me, people with no sense of humor whatever will get the chance to tell you that they think that line A is funny and line B is not. which is sort of a contradiction in terms. And at the end of that arduous and almost suicidal to the writer process, you will come to the process known as reconciliation, where you try to reconcile the irreconcilable and incorporate lines and suggestions that are often at cross purpose with one another. And at the end of that, the speech goes to the president once again. And that voice is really the only voice in the end that counts. And, if you're lucky, the speech will suit the president well enough at that point so that, for example, it will reach him and be accepted maybe, let's say, 5 to 6 days prior to the actual giving of the State of the Union, so that he can spend that interval, the last 5 to 6 days, basically polishing and practicing the speech so that he can appear to have memorized the speech when he appears on Capitol Hill tomorrow night, when in fact, as we all know, I would hope by now, that he is really reading the speech through the magic of the teleprompter.
Right. Now, when you write a speech, I would imagine, and you wrote a lot of speeches, I'm sure, for President George H.W. Bush, you've got to kind of hear his voice saying the words, don't you?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I know that when I began to write for Bush 41, I had written a number of books by then. I had written for former Treasury Secretary and would have been President John Connally by then. And I had written some speeches for President Reagan, not in a regular capacity, but from time to time. And my voice changed depending upon for whom I wrote. But it didn't sound in any of the speeches as if I were writing it, because it can't. My adage to anyone who would be a speechwriter is that when you speak for someone else, you check ego at the door. If you want to massage your ego, go write a book under your own name so that it can sound like you. But you're not there to sound like you. Nobody voted for me when I went to work for the president in the White House, but millions of people voted for Bush 41. So it was incumbent upon me to try to sound like him, not for him to try to sound like me. And the old Indian expression to try to walk in another man's moccasins, and that's the ultimate goal. And you never quite get to 100%. You try to get as close as you can. You try to listen. You try to follow. You try to look at videotape. You try to read as much about his background as you possibly can. You try to talk with him in person as much as you can without abusing that privilege. And with luck, and with time, and with an affinity of purpose, I think, and hopefully of value, you get closer and closer to 100%.
By the way, if you'd like to call Curt, 1-800-357-0910 and ask him about speech right here, it'd be great. Curt, are there any lines over the years that you sit back and we might remember today that you wrote and you said, that was me when he said that? You just kind of inside yourself said, okay, with all the things you said a moment ago in mind, but you said, that was me. That was my little turn of a phrase there, and I really liked that.
Well, I liked it. I'll give you one that I liked, and I think the president liked as well, because it's on the wall of the Bush 41 library at College Station, Texas, the library of the
right.
presidency of Bush 41. And it was in 1992, and the culture war had sprung up full-blown. And I was trying to make the point that, we stood for square America against counterculture America. And I had a line that our good friends at Fox TV did not like, not Fox TV News, but Fox TV Entertainment. Mm-hmm. And the line was, we need a nation closer to the Waltons and the Simpsons. And the Simpsons took umbrage at that. The Waltons didn't, because they were no longer on the air. But, I believed in that, and I think that Bush 41 did as well.
And I can remember that line, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe in that, devoutly. And I think that, you look at how dysfunctional the American family has got. Who in their right mind can disagree with that line, really, at heart today?
When you look at the State of the Union today, the State of the Union was not always an address, as I'm sure you well know, being a student of history. And, there was a time that they
written address.
Yeah, they just didn't send anything up, just maybe a little letter to them and said, hey, here's how things are going. Thanks a lot. See you later.
Most Americans probably would prefer that today.
I was just going to say, could we go back to that?
Night.
And that was my question. Are they still important? Are the speeches still important today, or have they simply become the same speech over and over again?
Not nearly as important. And the reason is numbers. And that is far fewer Americans will tune in tomorrow night to hear Barack Obama in his sixth State of the Union address.
Right.
And God Almighty, his 6 millionth address, it seems, as president, is simply because of the multiplicity of entertainment options. When Richard Nixon was president, there was the embryonic PBS, but really that was not existent in every market. Most markets got NBC, CBS, and ABC. So if you were in Peoria, or even in St. Louis, you got Nixon, or Nixon, which he liked, making it perfectly clear on every television network in the land.
Right.
But that was not exactly variety at its best. But he loved it because obviously it was easy to reach the average American. He had total monopoly. Today, you have everything but monopoly. And, you don't like Obama tomorrow night, you like the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl has a monopoly, it seems. And you go from ESPN to ESPN2 to ESPN Classic to ESPN University, on and on. And or you go to to the Hallmark station, or you go to the Home Shopping Network. I mean, you and I could come up off the top of our heads with 50 to 60 channels that the viewer could have access to tomorrow. So the president doesn't have nearly the automatic access to the American viewer. And the network numbers, Gary, show that. A president, let's say a Nixon or a Reagan, could count on routinely 70, 80, 100, 110 million Americans tuning in to State of the Union. Obama won't come close to that tomorrow night.
Have speeches become the main subject rather than a laying out of what the policy that is well enacted as a result of it should be?
How would Obama talk about policies enacted well out, thought out, that he could
That's my purpose in asking about
that
this.
That would last about 2.5 minutes. Particularly if you talked about Obamacare. No, it depends upon the president.
Yeah.
I would suggest, I'm a tad biased, but I think history would support me, that Bush 41 could talk about policies that were thought out. I mean, he believed very strongly in substance over style. He had the old-fashioned notion that governance, was part of being president. In fact, that governance was being central to being president. This man thinks that you can shuffle through the presidency on a shoe shine and a smile. And, he is about as shallow as a spoon. And I think we've seen that come to fruition. And if you have any doubt, I have 2 words for you: Obamacare.
Yes.
And that may elect you as president. It doesn't make you a successful president. And I think, the more I study the presidency and have been there and look at it now, and the more, the older I get and just look at life, I think there are 2 kinds of people, Gary: people of substance and people of style. And this man is a person of style, and it has not served us well.
When we come back, I'm going to give you a difficult assignment. I know you give assignments to your kids at Rochester all the time.
Right.
But I'm going to ask you to write President Obama's State of the Union address for tomorrow night. And if you had a chance, and he would let you do it, what you might say to the American people. Can we come back and give that a shot?
Yes, as long as I don't have to think like Obama.
No, you don't. Think like Curt Smith. And we'll look forward to having you back here in just a moment, Curt. Thanks so much. President, by the way, looking to reset with his State of the Union address tomorrow night. He'll attempt to pivot away from the controversies that marked 2013. There were a few. And reframe his agenda around government. With us this morning is Curt Smith, who wrote some State of the Union addresses for President George H.W. Bush. As you heard this morning, maybe not the greatest job that he'd ever want, but we asked him when he comes back from the break here, and we're doing that right now, to write the speech for President Obama tomorrow night. So, Curt, maybe the toughest assignment you've ever been given. What would your speech sound like tomorrow night?
Well, I would recite very briefly that all the great moments in American history have been bipartisan, nonpartisan. That is the Transcontinental Railroad.
Yes.
That is World War I. That is perhaps above all World War II. That is the going to the moon. That is to the enormous technological progress that has marked the age of the computer. And they have been not conservative nor liberal, and they have not been Republican or Democrat. As Jefferson said, we are all Republicans, we are all Federalists. And I would eat some crow. I would engage in as much of a mea culpa as Obama is capable of. I would say I perhaps have blamed Republicans when perhaps I ought not to have. I would say they perhaps have blamed me when perhaps they ought not to have. The key to moving forward, however, is not to look in a rear view mirror. I would hope to do that over these next 2 years. I would hope Republicans would join me in that great enterprise. For my part, I am showing my sincerity by delaying the individual mandate by a year. And that, I think, Gary, would be the most tangible way that he could show that he is serious, incidentally, about sacrificing some of his goals to meet Republicans. Otherwise, it's going to be seen as simply more tokenism, more symbolism, more fancy Dan, more dancing around the edges, more Obama speak, in terms of Obamacare. And I would simply say that too often all parties have engaged in the kind of strident rhetoric that really has served America not well, and that our forefathers would not be proud of us. Our great goal in the next 2.5 years will be to make our ancestors and our forefathers, irrespective of race or heritage or generation or ethnic identity or geography or religion, proud of us, because why shouldn't they? After all, as Franklin Roosevelt often said, we are Americans. Now, I think that would be received rather well.
Wow.
But I don't think he's capable of that. I truly don't.
I don't either. And
because that would require the kind of humility that Ronald Reagan showed routinely. After all, it was Reagan on his desk who had the great sign that there is no limit as to what a man can achieve if he doesn't care who gets the credit.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And the other part here is that his speeches, it seems to me, have always kind of morphed into one thing. They morphed into I. Yeah. And the other part about that is that there's always someone to blame, or he's whining about someone. And you get tired of that after a while. You want to hear, what are you doing to lead and help galvanize these people?
That is exactly the point.
Yeah.
He did it for so long because he got away with it for so long. In a sense, his enablers. And he had so many enablers. He had the Democratic Party. He had every left-wing pressure group in the country who enabled for him. He had virtually 99% of the national media enabling for him. He was never asked even a reputable question, let alone a challenging question, let alone an honest question at a White House press conference. If listeners really want to get a flavor of how much he got away with, look at the patty cake way with which he was treated at a White House press conference, and then look back at a videotape of how Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon was maligned and berated at their press conferences as they were treated basically as foreign occupying powers by the left-wing print and electronic journalists. And as a result, I think this is why Obama was so taken aback when he was vilified by the American people over Obamacare. I think basically he thought he could get away with this.
And in the last year, up until last year, his trust numbers had kind of held pretty steady. Well, that's taken a deep dive in addition to his performance numbers out there as well. And so obviously for a speech giver, and we have about 2.5 minutes left here,
right.
for a speech giver, that becomes the crux for which your speech has any kind of value at all,
sure.
Your credibility, isn't it?
Sure it is, because he lied. And all of us know people who lie. We ourselves have lied. I mean, let's be honest. They may be white lies, they may be darker than lies.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, he came to every American in 2009 and early 2010, and he lied. He lied because he knew he had to. He knew he had to lie to get his Obamacare passed, because he knew that if he said, well, this is going to mean that you may lose your coverage, it probably will mean that you will lose your doctor. It will mean you 80% of Americans who love your health care, as ascertained by every poll in America, that you're going to lose what you love. He never within a million years.
He may have well lost
within shouting distance.
He may well have lost his second term as a result of that too, because obviously he did it before the second term
exactly
came up. Yeah.
So he lied, and he knowingly lied. He lied to us, and we don't like to be lied to. And he lost many of us forever, even those of us who voted for him once in 2008. And when someone lies to you, it's funny how life works. You never trust them again. And this is his great problem, it seems to me, looking toward the final 2.5, 3 years of his presidency.
Curt, final question. I have about a minute 15 with you. Who gave the greatest speech that you ever heard? Who was the best speech giver out there as well?
Well, Franklin Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan, flip a coin.
Yeah.
In terms of if you had an LP record and their greatest hits, you would have a deluxe volume. The most surrealistic and the most moving speech I ever heard was Richard Nixon on the morning that he resigned, talking about his mother being a saint, and that extraordinary speech in the East Wing of the White House, which only Nixon could give. But I think Franklin Roosevelt, certainly in his speech in terms of Pearl Harbor, talking about yesterday, a date which will live in infamy, which he coined the term infamy on his way to Capitol Hill. He was a perfectionist. He never stopped changing his speech. Or Ronald Reagan, when he talked to America the same day of the Challenger explosion, in which we lost seven
the face of
brave heroes. Great speeches, I think, great in different ways, but all of the above. And I'm sure if I had 5 minutes, I could think of 20 more.
Curt, great stuff today. Thank you so much for joining. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And we're going to put your little segment up on our Facebook.com/910WSBA today so people will know what your State of the Union sounded like.
Gary, my treat, and stay warm.
Curt, I will, and thanks again. We'll look forward to our next time soon.
Thank you.
Take care.